cocktail sessions, educational and inspirational talks from experienced startup founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders.
So I had a very cool moment just now. Actually, one of the earlier speakers, said, "Raise your hand if you're starting something," and I got to raise my hand because about 2 months ago I quit my job. So everybody, I think here can appreciate that. Yeah. So before I used to start my talks and I used to say I'm an intrapreneur, right? Because I work for somebody else, but I do all my other stuff on the side secretly. And now I don't have to do that anymore. I can be a full-fledged entrepreneur. So how exciting is that, right? So I thought I'd talk a little bit to you about what has been sort of the secret behind why things have worked out for me sometimes and why they haven't sometimes. And for me, it was sort of an interesting mode growing up because I had this culture that sort of told me that there were a couple of different paths that I could take, right? I'm Indian, my family's Indian. A lot of Indian kids, when we grow up, we're gonna be told by our parents that we should be a doctor or an engineer. And these are acceptable career paths. My vision for a career path that I thought I wanted to be was, when I graduated high school, I wanted to be a playwright, not an acceptable career path for Indian parents to hear about, because you can't support a family being a playwright, as we all know. But when I was in high school, I said, okay, well, let me try this technology thing out. So there's this program called the Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology Summer Camp. And my parents said, this looks like a really good thing. It's 3 weeks. You'll really enjoy it. And of course, I was in between 10th and 11th grade. I said, okay, I'll try it out. Why not, right? It's only 3 weeks. It's an all-boys summer camp, and it'll be an experience. And hey, at least I get to leave home, which for me, for the first time, was kind of cool, right? So I applied to this camp, and I got in. And I got there, and it's all boys who are in between 10th and 11th grade. And immediately, the first thing they do is they bring us into a room like this, and then they randomly assign us into groups. And everybody's in like a group of 3 or 4 people. And so I get into my group, and each one of us is given a task, a challenge. So it's a science-based class, and they say, you need to create a solution to this challenge. We had to build some sort of water turbine thing, something. And so our group goes off, and we start meeting, and these 3 other guys that I'm with are literally like super geeks. Not just like regular geeks, they're super geeks. And they start talking in a super geek kind of language that I've never heard before. And I think it's English, but I'm not entirely sure. And pretty quickly, they realize that I am not on the same super geek status that they are. And, as 10th grade boys will do, there's no real kind way to ignore someone apart from just ignoring them. And so I'm shunned from my group. And for 3 weeks, our goal was to work in projects with our teams. So my group had already shunned me without really telling me anything. And so I had a lot of free time for these 3 weeks. And our group was not the only team of super geeks, right? All the other teams had super geeks too. Now, the one thing that super geeks don't do very well is interact with each other, right? So each super geek team went off in their own little cluster. And I became the one who said, you know what, let's get together for like an ultimate frisbee game. Or let's have like a social thing, right? Because, hey, what the hell else am I going to do? I'm just standing around. So I started doing all of these things, and for 3 weeks we had fun and got to meet some people. Finally gets to the last day of the program. And this is the day when everybody's presenting all of their things. Actually, the last 2 days. All the groups are presenting, and then they have a series of awards. They present like the best solution to the science thing, right? And in addition to those awards, they have a couple of additional individual awards. And so one of the individual awards is what they call the Good Citizen Award. And that's based on votes, and everyone votes for who they think a good citizen was. Now, because all these super geeks went into their clusters, they didn't know anyone outside of their own cluster. So the only person that got more than like 2 or 3 votes was me, because that was the only person they knew. So I got voted as the good citizen, and I got to walk up, and I got my little plaque, and I went home, and my parents said, what did you learn? What project did you work on? And I said, some sort of turbine something. But look, I won the Good Citizen Award. And then a couple of years later, I was describing that to somebody, and they said, so you went to an all-boy high school summer camp, and you won Miss Congeniality. And I said, yeah, I guess that's what I did. But it also gave me a clue as to maybe my career wasn't going to be about engineering. Maybe it was going to be about something else. And so for a while, I tried to figure out what that something else was. I started a couple of businesses. They didn't quite work out. Moved to Australia for a while. Worked for a company there. And slowly I realized this recurring theme, this recurring thing in my life that was the moments when I succeeded was usually because of some sort of personal connection that I had. I got jobs through personal connections. When I had a business that people would support and talk about, it happened because someone stood up and fought for me. It was a lot of what you were talking about in your story. You know, it was the personal connection that resulted in something positive happening, winning the pitch or not winning the pitch. And as that started to happen in my professional life, I also had this moment in 2004 when my first son was born. And we decided that we were going to take a trip to Australia because we wanted to, go on vacation. And in order to do that, of course, I had to get my son a passport. And in order to do that, I had to get the birth certificate. And we wanted to go very soon after he was born, so we didn't have the birth certificate yet. So the process in Washington, D.C. to get a birth certificate for a kid is that you can actually wait, or you can physically go to the birth certificate office and get it, right? Old school. So I'm like, all right, I'll just go to the office. So I go to this office, and it's kind of like this glorified closet, basically, where this one guy has this cubicle, even though he's the only guy in the office, in like this whole room. So imagine like a cubicle, but not next to any other cubicles. It's like a solo cubicle. I'm not sure why the guy would keep the walls up. Maybe he kind of likes to have some sort of, maybe it's like his fort, right? We all like forts. But basically in this guy's cubicle fort, he's got like stacks of manila folders, and they're in some sort of system because, I know that they're in a system because they sort of create like a stairway down to his computer. So if you can imagine, you can sort of see him kind of grabbing one and moving it to the next one, and it's just sort of, cascades down to his computer. And so I go there and I say, my son was born in such and such hospital and I'd like to get a thing. Actually, before I do that, there's another woman there. And she's clearly under like a lot of stress for some reason. I think if it's relatively soon after you're born and you have to do something that nobody wants to do, which is go to the office for a birth certificate thing, like the guy should probably take care of that because she's got a lot of other stuff going on. But this woman had to do it herself, and she was clearly not having her best day. So she was angry at him for stuff that wasn't his fault. And she was like, yelling at him because he couldn't get this. And the poor guy is like, he's in his solo cubicle fort, right? Like, he's not a people person. If you have a cubicle like that, you're not a people guy, right? So he's dealing with her and he finishes. And then I get up and it's my turn. And I go to the guy and I start talking to him, and I'm just kind of, being a regular good dude, a nice dude. And he says, I don't know exactly where your paperwork is, but I'm going to help you out. So he takes from this special drawer that he's got, literally special drawer, he's got the letterhead of the US government unprinted on that he pulls out of this drawer and puts into his typewriter. 2004, he's got a typewriter. Click, clack, click, clack, click, clack, typewriter. And he puts it into the typewriter and he types out a birth certificate for my son and he stamps it. And he says, here you go. Birth certificate from the District of Columbia. I'm like, holy shit, this guy could fucking mint, birth certificates as a job. And he's standing there just giving me one. And I'm like, does this guy even know the power that he's got? Right? He is the US government right there. That guy is the US government. And he just did that for me. Why? Because I was nice to him. Because he could have done it for the other lady right in front of me. But he didn't. And the reason why I'm telling you that, even though it's not a business story, is because that moment, right? That moment when business gets done and someone goes that extra mile and helps you because they like you, that happens all the time. That's what Likeonomics is about. That's what business is about. That's what success is about. And I see that over and over, and you probably see it too. And so that's really what I wanted to write about. That's what I wanted to talk about. And I think for you guys, that's what I would love for you to take away from my talk, which is don't forget the importance of making that personal connection. Because everyone's got a long list of stuff to do. And if you can be at the top of their list, you will succeed. Thanks.